Hi, Mervyn.
Good morning, Jez.
How are you?
Yes, I'm fine, Jez. Thank you. Jez, a quick comment. I've got a bit of a problem with this video. I can't seem to get the slide to play at the moment on your slide you sent. So
it's not the slide. You need to link to the EnCO webpage, the EnCO LinkedIn group.
Oh, right. Okay, right.
There wasn't a link in that file or anything.
It wasn't embedded. Right. Okay.
No, because it wouldn't. So yeah, if you just go to the LinkedIn group.
Hold on. I've got it.
Every organisation has to make this change.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I recognise that voice.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let me.
Good morning, everyone. We'll wait for a few others to join.
Yes, we're just literally about to start. Do you want to share screen, Jez, or shall I hold the screen?
No, you do the screen because my signal's not great today.
Sorry.
But...
Right. Yes. So, good morning, everyone who's on so far. As Jez said, we will just wait a little bit longer. Just really wanted, as part of an introduction, to welcome everybody to day 2 of our events on Net Zero Week. Very happy to be partnering with this initiative. It's a brand new week of events for 2021. Obviously very relevant for everyone involved in the net zero journey. I'm Mervyn Pilley. I'm the director of ESTA, the Energy Services Technology Association. We're a trade association built totally around members providing energy efficiency solutions across primarily non-domestic commercial businesses, operations. In existence for about 35 years, and obviously always very happy to help businesses solve their energy efficiency situations and potentially the start of every net zero journey. So thank you for everyone who's joined us today. We've got a week of events that are visible on our website and through the Net Zero Week website as well. So hopefully if you enjoy your participation in today's events, then please feel free to book on events for the rest of the week. And just to confirm, this event will be available on demand on the Net Zero Week website after the finish of the live broadcast. A little bit of housekeeping, really. Everyone, I think, is familiar with the Zoom platform. Just ideally, if you can use the chat box to post any questions you have, and we'll probably take Q&A at the end of the presentation. As I said, I think that probably covers off everything we need to cover off at the moment. Just literally a couple more minutes. We have got more people scheduled to book on than we've got on at the moment. Jez, if you're there, I think we'll make a start. And you're on mute at the moment.
That's fine. I was just, Dan and I were just on the chat function, chatting amongst ourselves while we were waiting.
Okay, you right, okay, yeah.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm Jez Rutter from JRP Solutions. I'm the Managing Director. But today is not really about JRP. It's about the role that I've been playing with ESTA. At the time this initiative started about 4 years ago, I was actually the chair of the Independent Energy Consultants Group, which is obviously one of the 4 groups within ESTA. And it was, well, it was part by chance, part by design, at one of the meetings about 4 years ago, that I mentioned the subject of behavior change and explained my experience at an organization, which I'll give you a case study on a little bit later, a very good case study. And I'd always been staggered by the level of savings that it actually had achieved. And unbeknown to me at the time, and unbeknown to others in the meeting, also part of the same group, was that they also then came out with their own experiences, for example, such as James Britton regarding his experience at Heathrow and several others. And the savings were equally as staggering. And we therefore launched what became the beginnings of a program, really to try to incentivize others. You know, it was almost for a non-commercial. It is a non-commercial objective, in that people should be doing more in terms of behavior change and the massive savings that are potentially available if it's done in the right way, and if it's done on a sort of big enough scale, which I'll come back to different examples later on. So if we now go to the next slide, Mervyn. So this is the agenda that I intend to take you through. We'll get to the end and do Q&A for as long as the time allows. But in essence, I want to take you through the sort of history and the journey that we've gone on, and talk about all of the free resources that are available to people, whether they're consultants to help deliver such behavior change programs, or whether they're end user organizations with their own skills to do it, or a combination of the two. So as you see, we have also a number of classifications of approvals. One is for registered EnCO consultants who have done a course. Another is for an approved EnCO practitioner, who is someone that's done the course and proven that they have actually delivered the behavior change program. And then ultimately, what we're really trying to achieve is we want to register. It's a very low cost to do so, just to cover admin costs. We want to register EnCO organizations, which are those companies that are actually doing and continuing to deliver behavior change projects. Because the one surefire thing with a behavior change project, a bit like a compressed air leak, if you're in an industrial arena, you have to keep doing it. You can't mend the compressed air system and then think everything's going to be fine for the next 20 years. It doesn't work like that. And of course, there's the old adage that what you put in, you get out. And that couldn't be more true than for behavior change. So I'll then go on to a case study, which is actually at Rolls-Royce, and then talk about what you could potentially do next, depending on your sort of background and interest in this area. Next slide, please. So this slide builds. So what I'm showing really is a summary of the objectives that we set in the first year, about 2.5 years ago. We began to look at the vision and mission and objectives, critical success factors, for trying to make behavior change projects become mainstream. And we actually have, over the 12 months before we publicized this, so this is about 18 months old, so we're kind of halfway through that 3-year period in actual fact, knowing that it would be a slow builder. But we set and finalized our objectives and strategy, and there are 12 objectives, but I'm just going to show you 3 on here. So the first one is to build between 50 and 100 projects, behavior change projects, delivered that are proven using IPMVP. And at the moment, we only have 1. But these things like behavior change projects don't happen overnight, and time is required to actually build. And the same goes for building capacity amongst people able to support the delivery of behavior change projects. So we recognized early on that in order to deliver between 50 and 100 projects using and proven using a measurement and verification approach, was that there weren't enough behavior change specialists in the UK, let alone globally. Because after all, this is a global initiative, and what can apply in the UK can apply anywhere in the world. So we have a number of different streams of activity to help build activity, to help people, whatever environment they're actually in, to initially assess and then later deliver behavior change projects. And that has included training courses. We're now actually in the middle of running our 11th course. The first one started in August last year, so almost 12 months. We've also developed tools relating to measurement and verification, excuse me, using the IPMVP protocol, but putting it in just the context of behavior change, which simplifies the amount of wording and so on and so forth. And I'll show it you later, we've developed a gap analysis tool, which we call the EnCO matrix, which helps initially determine where an organization is, where they could get to, and therefore identify tasks that need to be undertaken as part of a program. And then the third of these 12 objectives on the next build is the importance of collaboration, particularly with government, but actually with all sorts of organizations to sort of promote and bring forward the urgent need, not just to concentrate on technical projects. Our work early years, actually, which was actually, but in a slightly different way, it was, if you've seen the Climate Change Committee report, they mention behavior change, and the figures that they show are very similar, in fact, to ours. But very roughly, we say that 50% of energy efficiency opportunities is people-based. That might be relating to data, it might be relating to actions that people actually take on the ground. But at the end of the day, only 50% of potential energy efficiency improvements going forward is actually technical, which of course is where all of the effort and grants and all of those sorts of things currently are available. So we're trying to change the landscape in quite a big way, and it's quite difficult, shall I put it that way, but we are beginning to make inroads. And I'll show you some information that we've had in terms of dialogue with BEIS a little bit later on. And then on the next build on the slide, what's the overall aim of all of these? As I said at the beginning, we want behavior change projects to become mainstream. The reason we have chosen quite a tough target in terms of them being measured and verified through IPMVP is because we really recognize that behavior change projects need to be proven. And there's inevitably, people will doubt the potential to get the savings and to maintain the savings, which hitherto have been weaknesses when people have delivered behavior change projects, albeit that it doesn't need to be like that. So we believe that sort of 10% energy reduction by 2030 would be quite achievable, but it needs resource and it needs commitment and it needs people's buy-in. Okay, next slide, please. So this is, I recognize that you should be able to read the words, but if you want a copy of this, it's available on the EnCO website, and I'll show you the link to the EnCO website a little bit later. So you can write it down, go and have a look. But it's a website in essence that's full of resources, and the EnCO matrix is one of those. It's built on a similar model that you will have seen before, actually started in the early 80s with the Building Research Establishment, and has gone through various iterations since then. But this is, whilst it's using that model, this is completely new. The information in it is completely new. And we built the strategy around what are the 5 pillars relating to a behavior change project, namely engagement, alertness, skills, recognition, and adaptation. So in the 5 different boxes, which we've purposely scored 0 to 4 on the grounds that there's a multiplier and a score that comes out of it. And if someone's doing nothing, then the score should be 0 rather than going 1 to 5. There's also a half mark if you're sort of between the phases. And on the version that's on the EnCO website, there's actually over to the right-hand side a drop-down box, and charts automatically form depending on where you put the scores, A, where you are now, and B, where you think you could get to. And it's important not to just put 4s in terms of where you get to. You need to put really in a short to medium term horizon of a practical nature to move across the pillars in a consistent way. Very jagged profile, if let's say you scored 1 on all of them, but 4 on skills, well, if you do that, your skills are actually being undermined because you don't have all the other elements into place. So a very balanced profile is important as well across the matrix. So that the purpose is to develop, as I say, an early position in terms of a gap analysis. It could be used in many different ways. It could be used on an organization basis. It could be used on a site basis, a building basis, by department. And it's also quite a good facilitation tool to engage those people that you're addressing at whatever level to actually have the debate. And you'll find as well, excuse me, you'll find as well that different people will score it in different ways. We had a great example where an energy manager on the area that's sort of around the area of policy scored it a 4, but the factory manager that ran the site actually scored it a 0. And when asked the question, well, why have you scored it a 4? He said, well, I rolled out an energy policy 9 months ago. And the factory manager was asked the same question. He said, well, I didn't know it exists. So although the score, oh, that's good. Although the score might be 4 to the energy manager, in reality, the score may as well have been 0 because nothing's actually been done with it. So it's an interesting tool. I'll leave it at that and move it on to the next slide, please. I didn't know you could zoom in like that, Mervyn. That's very good. So talking about some of the different sort of vehicles that we've incorporated. The first then is the registered EnCO consultants. And this is a sort of bespoke course, which is 4 2-hour modules. As I said, we're now in our 11th course that we're running, and you'll see the numbers of those that have gone through the system shortly. So we are, by doing this, building capacity, and it does afford CPD, which obviously is useful. We'd like to think it's a highly interactive course. One of the things we can't do thus far, haven't been able to do this far, is add a layer in terms of facilitation. Facilitation's very key when you're delivering behavior change projects. You can be the best engineer in the world, but if you're struggling to communicate or facilitate, then you won't necessarily get the same results. So, and then the next stage is to become having delivered a project, as I explained earlier, to become an approved EnCO practitioner. So it's sort of 2 building stages. We have on the website, we have many delegate testimonials, and we also have a testimonial from Bays. Go on to the next slide. So these are the scores on the doors after the 9th course. We're actually doing 10 and 11 course concurrently at the moment. So we should be up at around the 150 something mark of registered EnCO consultants in a couple of, well, probably a month's time. And we're targeting 200 by the end of the year. And so far we have 5 approved EnCO practitioners. Those are largely people that had previously delivered a behavior change project prior to joining the course, but went through the course and actually then got provided the evidence, including case study, and then were interviewed. It's not a complex process. Again, there's a very small charge for that to cover administration. And we just see it as a really strong recommendation of an endorsement of skills. Next slide, please. So some of the case studies on the website are as a result of people going through approved EnCO practitioner status. Others are not, and the types of case study that are actually on the website vary quite tremendously. Our view is that there is actually no such thing as a bad case study. Even if small slivers of, for example, if all that you did was training for an end user organization or within an end user organization, that is still a good case study in terms of resources, because we're trying to hold on the website if you like, a global database of all behavior change projects for people to actually be able to go and look at and use for their own purposes. The case studies that are there vary hugely in terms of the type of sector. It's very interesting, actually, if you take a look. You'll see on the right-hand side of the case study in purple there, we also have a score on the case study. It's not necessarily a score of how good the case study is, but it is a score as to how precisely the savings that are outlined have been measured, with 5 stars only being achieved if A, it has been done using IPMVP, and B, that it has been assessed independently using IPMVP. So to get to 5 stars is actually takes a little bit more effort and really needed to have been done prior to the behavior change project being undertaken. We also have on the website a number of resource documents, training articles. So there's materials that delegates on the course have to read, but they're actually also on the website. So there's lots of good practices, descriptions of obliquity, you know, which is getting to your end objective in a sort of two-step process, not necessarily, for instance, directed at energy savings. Energy savings are not necessarily the key way to actually get engagement. And other things are actually being added as we speak. And in fact, the website was launched in October of last year. And by this coming October, it will have been through a fairly major refresh, only to try to make documents easier to find. Okay, next slide, please. So I mentioned that from our perspective, the piece de resistance is actually organizations becoming registered. So organizations proving that they've both delivered it and are maintaining. This certification is open in 3-year periods, after which it would be reassessed. And we have a number of applications, and currently 2 are approved. The first one is Rolls-Royce, which is the case study I'll be showing you a little bit later. And the other one, and as types of businesses, they couldn't be more diverse, is Cheney School, which is in Oxfordshire, who are actually receiving their award next week. And the logo that's there, there's logos for all the different sort of levels. It's obviously something that can be proudly shown. For instance, at Rolls-Royce, the one that where it's actually been received, their top director received the award, gave a speech, and I know that it's being loudly hailed within the Rolls-Royce organization. Next slide, please, Mervyn. So we're going to test the technology now. So I'm going to sort of hand over in a second to Mervyn. But we've also recently launched a video. So I'll let Mervyn play it, and then we'll come back to that slide. Have we got volume, Mervyn?
We know the message, we know the need, but many of us don't yet know how we can best act to make these necessary changes. There is a common denominator in every organisation. It's the one we're speaking to right now, in fact, it's you, the people. It is estimated that many organisations could immediately reduce consumption by 50%. So why wait until 2030 or 2040? Half of those potential savings can be achieved by technical solutions. The other half by people solutions, which are low cost and fast paybacks. The opportunity of mobilising friends, peers and colleagues to do more is one we need to take advantage of now, before it's too late. It is by no means the path of least resistance. There are challenges along the way, but it is absolutely essential that people are part of the process for organisational decarbonisation across the globe. This sounds like a lot of learning and hard work to increase people's skills and engagement with energy. But EnCO has created an easily accessible, registered and approved framework that helps make this achievable. Created by world-leading experts and backed by the UK's leading bodies in energy, it is there to help organisations like yours to accelerate the journey towards net zero. The EnCO vision is one of continual improvement that drives energy efficiency and ultimately business performance. With it, we can start to realise those much-needed changes in the way that organisations use energy and the part that people play in making this change happen. EnCO is there to help you on your net zero journey. Engage, empower and equip your colleagues to challenge the norm and encourage widespread adoption of energy good practice throughout the organisation.
Thank you, Mervyn. If we could go back to the slides, that would be good. So the few key words in there. Sorry, if we could just go back to the previous slide. So few key words in there. I mean, it talks about the journey to net zero. And frankly, I can't see how any organization, other than by offsetting, which obviously will be somewhat vilified in years to come, could actually get to net zero without tackling behavior change and getting employees to do the right things. And the knock-on effect through to the domestic environment would also be huge. So this is such a huge opportunity, and we're so passionate about the need for organizations to do this. And frankly, anything other than doing this is the blind leading the blind. So the video is there to be used. So you'll see the link there, and we'll send these slides out. You'll see the link there. Go and get it. You can download it, share it. It's a free resource. And if you'd like and share that particular page as well, that would be helpful. We're up to 98 followers in a fairly short time, and as you can see, it's had 2,000 views so far. 2,106 now. Thank you, Mervyn, as you've just shown it. So please do take a look at it and use that resource. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we'd had discussions with BEIS. Now, things are starting to happen. I don't know if any of you have seen the ESOS Phase 3 consultation that's came out last week. And if you haven't, have a look, download it. It's currently asking in various categories for thoughts in terms of the delivery. So for example, it's likely, I would have thought, that net zero would be added as an angle within an ESOS survey, or it certainly should be. And if it isn't, then as a company, JRP will definitely be doing that. Also behavior change has now been brought very much into the agenda. We know from evidence that we have from some of those involved who actually were assessors assessing the ESOS Phase 2, that only approximately 5% of ESOS reports actually even mentioned behavior change, which is staggering when you think about the opportunity and think about it in the context of what we just showed. So please do take a look at it, and if you think you can help, then that's great. In terms of the video we showed, we obviously are talking generically when we talk about potentially 50% reduction in energy use for an organization. It will clearly vary according to the type of organization. If you're a brewer, for example, something very energy intensive, you need to brew in order and use energy in order to do what you do. So it probably wouldn't be a 50% availability, but there's a good chance that 50% of whatever was left would be around what people do. And as I say, it's not just people switching things off, it's much, much more than that. We actually have listed and detailed so far 146 different types of interventions that are related to behavior change. And one of those is training, and one of those is switching things off. So again, you'll learn more about that if you were to actually come on the registered EnCO consultant course. So next slide, please. So please have a read of this. This was a testimonial received by BEIS, and sort of stressing the importance, and it's one of many that are actually on the EnCO website. And sort of while you're looking at that, not only is the whole behavior change EnCO, we've called it EnCO, Energy Conscious Organization, basically for two reasons. One is that people don't like the word behavior change because they don't like their behaviors being changed. Secondly, it's actually not about individuals per se, it's about the organization changing the approach to how they address energy efficiency. And the principles go well beyond energy. So we're concentrating on the word energy in the title, Energy Conscious Organization, but actually it's sustainability. It could go much further into just general business practices and businesses being efficient by adopting some of the principles that are outlined in the EnCO behavior change methodology. There, hopefully you've had time to read that. But the other thing that I would also just mention, you'll have seen it at the head of quite a few of the slides, is that I should have mentioned at the top of the show, so to speak, that whilst this started as an ESTA initiative, very quickly we asked the Energy Institute to come on board, and Energy Institute have been supporting us all of that time in terms of strategy teams and input into the whole outcome. So it's very much a partnership between the two organizations. Next slide, please. So I'd like to now take you through, for probably 15 minutes or so, a case study that was completed really about 6 years ago. And it's one that actually, perhaps it would be an overstatement to say it changed my life, but it changed the direction of my life. I've been in energy since I graduated with unusually with a degree in energy engineering in 1983. There were only a couple of courses that mentioned energy at the time. And until 2013, when this program started, everything that I'd done in all of those years was technical. And I'm fairly well known for being a technical expert in numerous areas such as steam and compressed air. But I was, as I said, I was sort of shook to the core when the outcome of what actually was achieved in this case study. So let me take you through it. Next slide, please. So the background, even prior to this bit of background, is that as an organization, we'd actually been helping Rolls-Royce on energy efficiency matters since 2003. So 10 years almost at this point. And also at this point, over that 10 years, Rolls-Royce had reduced their absolute energy consumption by 30% against a backdrop over that same 10-year period of output increasing by 40%. Nevertheless, it was a 30% absolute reduction. So it was a very good, proactive organization that really managed energy well. And we got to the point of thinking, okay, what next? And we'd tried a number of smaller initiatives. Of course, training and those sorts of things are always important. But we then built into 2013 to deliver a holistic behavior change project. And it was done initially as a pilot just at the Bristol site. So I'll talk initially about the Bristol site and then talk a bit wider. So you'll see from the bullet points, which I won't go through other than perhaps a couple of them, the stepped and logical approach that we actually went through in terms of designing a behavior change project. Now, one of the worst things that someone can do when they're actually pulling together a behavior change project is just to start it. It really doesn't work, and it's one of a number of examples we could cite as to why they don't work. So there's a quite precise, or a number of options of quite precise ways of going around a behavior change project. And planning could be no more important for behavior change than anything else. There was a great quotation that said, the first thing that you need to do is plan. And if you don't have enough time to plan, then the first thing you need to do is plan. So therefore, probably 2 to 3 months from deciding to do a program to actually starting it is all of the planning phase. So it's things like having an energy charter. What's that? That's a vision, mission, critical success factors, project plan, who's going to do what, roles and responsibility, etc., etc. I put the roles and responsibilities as a separate item because it's also a very important element in terms of not just defining what people do, but actually defining what they don't do. So everyone's really clear of what their roles are, whether you have a hierarchy of, if you like, more senior energy champions and then that might do more. You're usually, but not always, well advised for champions to be sort of geographically split so that they're covering different areas. And your design as to how you're actually going to approach the whole program and thinking about, well, where are the significant energy users? Who are they and what do they actually control? Who are you actually trying to address when you deliver a behavior change program is all part of the planning. And you may then go on to things like staff surveys. A launch event isn't actually an essential element, but it can be really good to actually start momentum. It doesn't actually build any momentum subsequently. And also, I perhaps should have mentioned that as part of your planning, determining within your different threads of what you're going to do, which ones are actually adding the momentum, because they become the more important elements of your plan, is also important. Now at Rolls-Royce, Bristol, you can see we delivered a number of different training sessions, but to call them training sessions would actually be almost a lie, because they were, whilst training was involved as part of it, they were more facilitated meetings than anything else. And probably 2/3 of the time during these half-day sessions was not spent in a classroom. It was actually spent in the factory, looking at different areas of the factory, the different champions actually visiting other areas in the factory that they don't know. Now I'm describing an industrial application here, but the same principles could be applied anywhere, whether it's offices, public sector, wherever. Because it's very important as part of that training, if I can call it that, for those that are involved to know how to look for opportunities, what to look for, and not necessarily always in detail, but certainly some element of how to calculate the savings in order to prioritize what projects go forward. And these projects tend to be low capex, sometimes and often no capex. At the beginning of the project, Rolls-Royce, and we supported it, wanted to timesheet, well, how much time are these different people spending? Well, they stopped that after a year. It was useful information, and we built that into the business case savings figures that you'll see later. But after that 12 months, it was well, we don't need to do this because it just becomes part of what people do. So the equivalent would be an organization, for example, booking time to health and safety. They shouldn't be doing that in as much as it should be just what people do. So many other elements, I won't go through them except to mention one more, which is ISO 50001. Now, I'm mentioning this not just in the context of this case study, but also more generically, that ISO 50001 is a brilliant vehicle to actually embed behavior change within an organization. So if you have a system that is 50001 or an equivalent to ISO 50001, it has all of the components that you need. And whilst just having ISO 50001 probably means you just score a 1 on that EnCO matrix if you're not actually delivering stuff around it, but potentially you could get to level 4 at the top much more quickly. Now, in this example, Rolls-Royce didn't have and still don't have ISO 50001, but they do have a system that is equivalent to, and I'm sure could be audited externally. So it certainly helped the extent to which it had an impact on the savings, I will never know, but I would have thought it would have been a component of it. Next slide, please. So just to take you quickly now through a few slides covering some of those points. There's 2 slides here on the reduction charter. So what does it cover? Well, you can see there, what's the problem? What's the objectives? What's the scope? Who's going to do it? Next slide, please. What are the resources? Who are the stakeholders? What's the approach? What are the risks? All of the usual things, in fact, that you might put into a business case, but actually calling it a charter and defining as well critical success factors is important. And it also enables buy-in right at the top of the organization. And having mentioned that, that's one of probably 10 different elements relating to a behavior change program that are more important than the other 136 of the 146 individual things that need to happen. So senior sponsorship, albeit that the most senior guy in the organization doesn't really often need to do anything other than show commitment, ask questions, show interest, is actually vital to making the most of a behavior change project. Next slide, please. So this is sort of timelines. Started in May 2013. There was a launch event, campaign, posters, banners, methodologies put into place. And ultimately, by September 2014, because it was kind of done in 2 parts, there were actually 36 champions in total across the one site. But in terms of time being spent by people, underneath the sponsor was the main manager that drove the program for Rolls-Royce, and underneath him, not in an actual organization structure, but a functional organizational structure for behavior change, there were probably 5 more senior behavior change champions that actually spent a little bit more time, but still not a whole load of time. And obviously they had their day job to do as well. Next slide, please. Just to give you some sort of visuals, obviously this is sort of old data on here, came from that course. But some of the materials were presentational, but as I said, the key, and it went through stages. It didn't assume anyone knew anything, so it started at the basics, and then it went through a number of different technical areas that we'll see on the next slide, please. And obviously the choice of what subjects in terms of technical subjects that you deliver knowledge around, and it's not just knowledge, actually it's capability, would be varied according to the organization in question. Next slide, please. Celebrating success is very important as part of behavior change program. It helps to drive momentum. The senior sponsor is there in the center of the picture, and this was the first lot of energy champions receiving their certificate after the 9-month program. As I said, it was much more than just training. It was actually using the opportunity to say, well, last meeting, Fred, you said you were going to do that. How's it going? And sharing it and discussing it as a team and moving and making progress. Next slide, please. Relatively simple, not sure of the extent that this contributed to the savings, but nevertheless, behavior change is a combination of lots of small actions that actually make a difference. And this is why doing a holistic behavior change program, so many different types of intervention, is the only way to do it, because that's the only way in which you'll actually be able to measure the success or otherwise of a project. Just doing a few elements of the 146 interventions, you are unlikely to be able to measure it. But having a robust structure and a look and a feel to the campaign, such as these posters, and there were many different types of posters. They were ultimately rolled out globally across Rolls-Royce using many different languages and currencies and so on and so forth. But it kept a message there. And of course, as we know with these sorts of things, they need to be kept fresh and changed and reinvigorated periodically. Next slide, please. Just a minute or so on this slide so that you can see the sort of different types of energy use and the level of metering. So level of metering was reasonably good, but actually as part of the measurement and verification bit, separate meters were actually put in, as I'll come to it a little bit when I talk about a parallel project that was taking place with an LED scheme. Next slide, please. Capturing interventions is really important. Now these could be interventions where you can't actually allocate a specific saving to. Many of them you can, but some you can't. But capturing them and determining which have been implemented, which you still can implement, and prioritizing those using a tool. It could be just a spreadsheet. There is also pieces of software that would deliver this, and using other techniques such as energy bridges and so on, and keeping things visual is really important. Next slide. I mentioned sort of shutdown campaigns. You know, it depends on the organization, but many organizations have shutdowns, perhaps Christmas, perhaps Easter, perhaps other times, summer 2-week downtimes in certain manufacturing, and so on and so forth. So actually measuring what actually happens during that period is the beginnings of a measure of success. And at the time this was done in 2015, the pilot had been completed at Bristol and had subsequently been rolled out to, surprise, surprise, their Bankfield site and Anstey site. And you can see the difference that it made just over that weekend, let alone the reductions in terms of base loads and other factors which applied all year round. Next slide, please. Now, there were also a number of what you might describe as technical interventions. There's a sort of a bit of a grey line between what's a behaviour change project and what's a technical project in the area of behaviour change. So one of the 146 items strongly recommended for a behaviour change programme is to set aside a red-lined fund, which might be a very low figure. So in their case, in the first year, it was £50,000. And the idea of it was to actually enable small interventions, typically less than 1,000, although I'm showing you some that actually were at around 1,000, to actually do simple projects, but that the capital for which, or revenue for which, was easily accessible. So idea was thought of, immediately sanctioned, implemented, see and assess the savings that were created, use it as a best practice example, roll it out everywhere else as a case study. And a number of these, well, many of these were actually done, but the key point was that you were getting momentum because you were allowing an almost immediate go ahead of an idea created by someone you're training to come up with ideas, and success breeds success. So this is very important. One of the other 10 that I mentioned. Next slide, please. Just something completely different here. You can see payback on this was about 1.5 months. So again, it was very, very low cost compared to the savings that were achieved. And this was just simply putting a cover to stop heat being exhausted. Now, you probably won't have that type of example, but you'll have lots of different examples in your business or that you'll know about that are somewhat similar. and are very low cost. Next slide, please. This is a bit of a pictorial of consumption over the period that we were in essence measuring. And you'll see the three different energy types there. It goes up and down because they operate on a 4-4-5 cyclical basis, but you can see the trends. Gas actually went up because they put in additional production capability. But having accounted for that and a number of other things, it was possible to actually isolate that to determine what savings actually were. And you'll see the other thing pretty much top center. There was also a project to replace LED lighting. So this was early years of LED lighting. So well, it was actually done 7 years ago, beginning of 2014. The project was set to save £125,000 a year for an investment of approximately £480,000. So roughly a 4-year payback. Remember those numbers as we move on to the next slide. The 15-month behavior change program, when you measure it at the end of the 15 months, you continue to measure because data is important, but you shouldn't be measuring the results until things have actually got embedded and you're really making changes, because behavior change projects, unlike technical projects, so maybe one of the frustrations for us engineers is that it doesn't happen overnight, it builds over time. But after 15 months, the savings had reached a rate of 8.9% per year, proven using IPMVP. And that was accounting for, because the only other technical project which saved about exactly the same was this LED lighting project, which, as you remember, I said cost £480,000, whereas the behavior change project for the same saving cost, including internal resources, £30,000. So staggeringly different. Now, since that time, we've actually been back and reassessed, and the savings from behavior change now running as of, actually it was based on end of 2019 data to remove the sort of COVID period, has now reached 14.5% from behavior change savings. And it's probably worth pointing out, as per that asterisk there, in 2015, 2014-15, that saving of roughly 9% savings actually only covered about 35% of the 146 different types of intervention. Others have subsequently been added, and they're probably currently implementing about 50 or 55% of the interventions. So there's still room for improvement. Okay, next slide, please. So what can you do next? Well, we're going to have question and answers momentarily. But in essence, just putting people into two groups. There's those people who actually work within end user organizations, and there's those people that help support end user organizations. And there isn't one solution for behavior change projects. It can be delivered both in-house, and in fact, in many respects, that's the best way to actually do it. Because if you're helping support the implementation, ultimately it's the end user that will make the savings. A consultant is really just a facilitator, an important element, but not making actual energy savings. Making advice for energy savings, sure, but not actually delivering them. So the registered EnCO consultant training course would be applicable for both, and would give you the insight and capability to actually then plan and start to implement a behavior change project. And once an organization has got to the point of being able to verify it, by whatever means. Again, it doesn't need to be IPMVP, but we would like it to be ideally. Then EnCO registered organisation status, and that obviously sits with the organisation. But the change agents, whether they're in an organisation or consultants, the change agents themselves can move from EnCO consultants to approved EnCO practitioners, and that, well, in fact, both of those are with the individual. So it's theirs wherever and whatever organizations they're with, because they have the skills and capability. So on that basis, and with a quick summary, that if we're trying to get to net zero, behavior change is a key and should be a key and core component. I'll go on to the next slide and ask for any questions.
Thanks, Jez. Actually, nothing in chat, so no questions directly from the audience. But what I will do, if it's right with you, I'll just take the host's rights to ask a question, and just I'm going to ask all of the events this week that this perhaps overall question. You mentioned the ESOS consultation, which obviously we hope will have an impact on how behaviour change is looked at by the government and how that feeds into the recommendations from ESOS, and can they perhaps be made mandatory? Are there things that can be done? Perhaps a slightly more general question, if you had a magic wand and you could say to government, I think this is an important intervention that government should put in through policy in terms of behaviour change and in relation to net zero, what would that be? Would you have a particular steer? I know we've been working with BEIS obviously for a long time to get this sort of support on the behaviour change side, and it's good to see it feeding into the consultation. But do you think there's something that could be done to speed it up?
Yes, very, very good question, and not just speed it up, but in a very big way. It needs investment. Or, you know, at the moment, with the dire emergency of trying to get to net zero, and we're only 9 years away from needing to really make a significant stride, and bearing in mind getting a behaviour change project into place probably takes 6 months, and delivering it takes another year, then, you know, time is of the essence if this particular area is going to make the significant difference that it can. So therefore, really, investment and incentivization of organizations to do it, I would say, is vital. And there are lots of ways that the government should be able to deliver that. And that's what we're currently still in discussions to try to get.
Yeah, I think this is the challenge, isn't it? And I think it's obviously feeding through literally as these events are happening this week. There's obviously some stuff coming out from government, still some big stuff not to come out from government yet in terms of policy and heat and building strategy and net zero strategies. But yeah, I think everyone agrees, and you've certainly showcased today, is the fact that behaviour change is not new. You've obviously been running these projects for a long time, but it seems to be still a very small, a bit like energy efficiency in the round. It doesn't seem to be high up everyone's agenda, which is madness, because you said if it's there, it's an option, it's fairly often low capex, you know, quicker payback. It just doesn't make any sense that people aren't.
Yeah, so that Rolls-Royce project payback was about 4 months.
Yeah, I think, and as you highlighted, the difference in cost between the behaviour change side and the LED side, it's an absolute no-brainer. Jez, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to say a huge thank you to you. I know you've had to put in a lot of extra work, so unfortunately, John Mulholland, who was going to present with you for family reasons, hasn't been able to make it today. So again, huge thank you to you.
Pleasure.
I know this has been a long, and it's full of information and knowledge, and thank you for all that extra resource. I'd also like to thank the participants who've taken part today. Just to reiterate that the recording will be available on demand for those who couldn't make it today. And if anyone does want any further information, then please look at the EnCO website as highlighted earlier. And hopefully look forward to seeing you this afternoon or in other events in the rest of the week. So thank you very much for everyone for taking part today. Thank you, Jez.
Cheers, everybody. Can't hear you, Dan.
How's that? Unmuted now.
There you go. Can you hear me now? There you go. There you go. No, how's it going anyway? You well?
Yes, all good. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. No, this